Hi everyone, you may have noticed I've been absent a bit lately. It's just because I've had a bit of COVID, so now I'm going to share with you my latest video. I've got asked to do this quite recently, and it's to show how to animate a gradient. So I've got this sort of gradient here, this nice pastel rainbow type gradient, and I've just sort of preset that up with some gradient colors, some gradient locations, and a start and end default that's basically specifying that I want the gradient to be showing vertically. So you can sort of see it's all set up here. What I'm going to do today is sort of infinitely rotate through that rainbow and also slide it down and slide it right, and I'll just also give the option to reset so you can choose a different option for animation. So first up, I'm wanting to import React, and that's because I'm going to be using React State to trigger the UI updates. And so what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to pull out my colors, location, start and end into a state variable so that the linear gradient gets updated. So I'm just creating this variable gradient options and this function set gradient options, and I'll be using state and setting the default, and the default will be these exact values that you can see below: gradient colors, gradient locations, start default and end default. And now I'm going to want to set those against the linear gradient itself so that any updates to gradient options will trigger the UI to update. Cool, you can see that that's all referenced and it still looks the same, so that's good. You can see I've got in my locations this extra one and this extra colour that actually lines up with the second colour here, and that's because I'm going to be wanting to slide my gradient, and so I want that colour to be visible and it not just to show yellow for ages until it ticks to the next colour, because that would just sort of be a sudden jump. I want it to look more like a seamless rotating gradient rainbow. So I'm going to use this gradient options ref. So I'm going to use react.useRef, and basically that's going to let me access what the actual current value of gradient options is. The reason you need this, and I'll link an article below that explains in a bit more detail, is that basically I'm going to be using set timeout to trigger the next phase of the animation, and if I don't use this gradient options ref, then basically it will get access to the old state, and so it won't really do any updates. So I was having some issues with that for a while, and that was the reason why. I'll also point out any other gotchas I've had throughout this, and I'll upload all my code to GitHub so you can take a look at any point and play around with it and make any adjustments you need. I'm not sure exactly what animations people want, but yeah, this is just a few simple ones. So I'm going to create this reset, and it's going to basically clear any existing timeout. So I'm going to need to define my timeout. I haven't set anything against that yet, but I will later. So if there's a timeout, then I'm going to want to clear it. And make it undefined so that people don't think there's something already existing in the future and just make things all clean and tidy. Then I'm going to set my gradient options back to what they are at the beginning, just so that they're back to their defaults. So I can just copy that from where I'm setting up the state. So yeah, copying that. And then for my button, I just need to give that on press function, which will reset. So that will be just that function that I've just defined then. And so now when I press reset, it'll reset. It'll look like it's doing nothing right now because obviously I've got nothing going on. But it'll be useful later when I've got some animations going. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is to add my infinite rainbow animation. So that's pretty cool. I'm basically going to shift the colors and slowly change the locations. To do that, I'm going to need some additional things. I'm going to need how much I want to move by, and you can adjust this to your needs to get smoother or more jumpy animations. I'm using gradient locations 1, which is 0.2 divided by 20, just to give me sort of like a constant update that's always going to head down to 0, and all of my locations are at the same distance apart, so it's always going to work out well. And I've got an interval of 30, which is every 30 milliseconds it's going to trigger an update, so it's quite regularly, so it'll be kind of quite smooth. You'll notice it whenever I show you that. So now that I've got that, I can set up my infinite rainbow function. That's, once again, just going to shift through the colors and also the locations. So I'll just define the function. So we're going to want to check that first location and see if it's going to hit 0 or be less than 0 after the movement, in which case we're going to just want to reset it and shift all the colours because we're at the next phase. Sorry, there's a bit of construction work going on next door, so I don't know if you can hear that. Building a house. So yeah, I'm going to want to shift the colour and reset the locations in this case. I'm going to create a copy of the gradient colours. And that's just so that I can modify it. So then I'm going to do a shift, which basically removes the first item in the array. And then I'm going to go and append to the end of the array the element at the second location, because that's the one that I want to follow on and will be the next colour that is at the end of the rainbow. So that's basically the one that I'll remove. This FBC will be in the first place, and E8B8 will be appended to the end. So that it will just be a continuous sort of stream of rainbow. After that, I'm going to want to set my gradient options once again. I can copy from above and just change what's changing, which is just the colours in this case. when it's the locations that need updating, so basically when we're not at 0 after the movement, then we're going to want to update the location. So I'll go and show you how to do that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a mapping function here. So I'll go gradient options ref.current.locations and I'll do a map. And basically what it's going to do is take every item in that array and create a new array with whatever is in my function applied to it. So I'm going to reduce each item in the array by the movement value, and if it's less than 0, then I want to return 0, so I'm going to use the math.min function there. And I was having some issues with the floating points, so what I ended up doing was I will do toFixed. And I also need the index because obviously you noticed I had 2 locations with 1, and I want to keep the last one always being 1 just so that the gradient's kind of continuous. I don't want it to move with it, otherwise it will just look a bit funny and the other colour will come into play too quickly. So that's why I'm just checking whether the index is the last index, because I want to just keep that colour always at position 1, no matter what. So yeah, I'll do math.max, because I want to get the maximum value. I don't want anything below 0. So math.max of 0 or item minus movement. And then, like I said, toFixed, just to make sure I don't have any sort of rounding issues. That actually returns a string, and so you really need to make sure you include this pass float here if you're using toFixed, because otherwise you're going to get locations array as strings, and that's going to cause issues when you try to operate on it in the future, and also your locations just won't work. So yeah, that was causing me issues because my animation would move once but then stop moving until it got to the color shift again. So yeah. I use the set gradient options. This time it's the gradient colors are staying the same, so I can just reference that gradient colors. And I'm just changing those gradient locations so I can change that. And then I'm going to want to set my timeout. Basically, that's going to be my animation. And it's going to call infinite rainbow again after that interval that I've specified earlier. So now that I've done that, I've got to add my on press for my infinite button. And that's just going to call infinite rainbow. And if I click on that, it's just infinitely scrolling. You can see a nice smooth rainbow scrolling around and around and around and around. It will just happen forever until you click reset. So here I've clicked reset, and I'm going to work on my slide down and slide right. These are actually very similar. The only difference is actually that I want to change my start and end. Those will be, so if I want to slide right, I need obviously to start at x is 0 and end at x is 1, whereas currently I'm starting at x is 0.5, ending at 0.5 and the Y is 0 and 1. So I need to kind of flip those. So it's horizontally rather than vertically. But anyway, that's irrelevant. My slide close can be the same for slide right and slide down, and I'll just show you how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to pass in the start and end, and I'm going to once again map my locations, and I'll be gradually increasing it this time rather than decreasing it. So I want to get the math.min this time. Once again, I'm using pass float because I'll be using two fixed, and I don't want to have that issue with the strings where you can't operate on the strings. So yeah, math.min of 1 and item plus movement. So the reason that I have to do this math.min and can't just let it go above 1 or below 0 is it actually causes issues because the locations array is limiting you to between 0 and 1. So that's why I've got this math.min in there, otherwise I wouldn't really need it if it let you go to different values. So yeah, that's why. And I'm going to once again set my gradient options once I've updated my locations. I don't need to do any color updates here because I'm just trying to move them slowly off the screen to be one solid color. You'll see it when I show you. And then I want to check basically if basically I want to check if every item is equal to 1, then I want to stop my animation. So if every item is not equal to 1, then I want to keep going just to continue sliding off the screen. So I'll go set timeout, and once again just call my slide closed function with the start and end values. And with my interval specified above, which once again you can play with and just it'll give you a different result in terms of smoothness and speed that things move off screen. That's pretty much it. And now I can call it from slide down and slide right. I'll start with slide down just because I've already got the defaults for that. For the start and end. So calling my function and passing in my start default and end default because I want it to be vertically this time, so that's why I've got the start and end defaults. So if I click on that, okay, so it's because I can't find that variable slide down. It's because I've actually called this slide close because it's used for both slide down and slide right. Sorry about that. So you can sort of see it sliding down off screen. No new colors are coming in until it's one solid color. You can see if I reset, it'll go back to normal. So now I want to do the same thing for slide right, but this time I'm going to pass in different values for the start and end. So that's just so that I can get it going horizontally rather than vertically. So I'm going to call them start horizontal and end horizontal. I'm going to go and define them up above. These are just my constants, so that's why I've just kept them all up the top here. And my Y I want to be just 0.5 so that it's happening horizontally. And now you can obviously change those if you want different animations. So you can see it's sliding right across, all the colors are disappearing until it's just one solid color. much like slide down. So there's slide down once again. It's the same thing, but a bit longer because it's a bit of a taller screen. And then we've got our infinite scrolling rainbow. So I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial today, and if you have, please like and subscribe for more content.